Hey guys, welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. Our guest today is the creator of the social network BRON, and we get into talking about how they are bringing together businesses and investors. Now, we get into some really scary waters when we start talking about how technology and innovation are going to be a disruptive force, not only to governments, but to the financial industry as a whole, and why there is such a suppression on this type of information. Guys, today's guest, Thomas Samuelson. Welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. Guys, we've got a great guest today, Thomas Samuelson. Thomas, thanks for coming on the show today.
My pleasure, Neil. Looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah. So, Thomas, you've got a 30-year career in finance, but we want to talk a little bit about the BRON social network that you've built and that you're continuing to build. What's sort of the problem that it solves there, and why did you sort of build that? Because you built that during the pandemic.
Yeah, so the problem we're solving is a problem that I had as a professional investor. So I worked for a large hedge fund. I spent 30 years on Wall Street. The last 20 was working as what we call a professional investor. This is someone who we manage money for large pension funds, for billionaires, this type of thing. We didn't deal with the public, and my job was to invest in developing countries and also countries outside the U.S. So I was in China all the time, in Brazil and Russia, and traveling and visiting and investing in large public companies. And one of the problems I had through the years was I've always had to my access to these companies and engagement was always through a middleman, through an investment bank. So whether it be Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, all the big banks out there, they're all involved in investment banking. And I didn't want to rely on them anymore because it became cumbersome. And like in any type of business, a middleman, this is what technology is for, to cut out the middleman, to make things more efficient. So I started thinking about ways to find ways to connect large investors or any type of investor directly with companies. Originally, we started with I had a video company. Prior to the pandemic, I had my own video technology, and we connected companies. We still do some video production, but we connected companies directly with investors. It sounds like old hat today, but prior to the pandemic, there was maybe 2% of meetings were taking place on video as opposed to in-person meetings directed through these middlemen.
Absolutely.
Then, as the pandemic hit, we were booming, but we were looking for other things because I saw that video was going to become commoditized, and it has become commoditized. So we said, okay, how can we solve this problem other than using video? And it was the idea behind saying, okay, one of the problems is that a lot of the information, public companies produce a lot of what I call content. So it's press releases, financial statements, regulatory statements. They produce a lot of educational things for investors, PDF presentations, most of this information, and now videos. Most of this information no one ever sees because they pay thousands of dollars to PR agents who send it out to the cloud. And other than Bloomberg, no one else picks it up. So whether it's Yahoo Finance or MarketWatch.com, they print maybe 10% of what these companies are publishing, because the idea with regular media is to present things to get people to come back and for their advertisers. So the problem that companies have is they're spending thousands of dollars all around the world producing this information that nobody's seen. So we decided to create an application ecosystem to aggregate all this information in one. So we're like an Expedia or a Zillow, but instead of travel and real estate, we're aggregating information from companies. And instead of creating a database or a website, we decided to say, okay, what's happening today? Where are people absorbing news? Where are people going to information? They're going to social media. They're going on their phone. They're going to Facebook Messenger. They're going to Twitter. They're going to Instagram. They're going to TikTok, absorbing news. So we just said, okay, we're not going to build another website and competing against. What we're going to do is we're going to build a social network, the first social network connecting companies and investors, and that's how the BRON Investor Network began.
Okay, so basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the things that because there was this huge influx into online, obviously during COVID, and you were seeing what was going on for companies and for investors, and you basically saw, okay, that material is not getting out there because it's getting swallowed up in these feeds of thousands and millions of these different posts. And so and rather than just creating another news site, you thought, hey, let's create a bit of the education and entertainment aspect simultaneously. Is that's sort of what I'm catching so far?
Yes, and then the other dynamic that exploded from the beginning of the pandemic is there has been an increase, and I call this in the U.S. the Robin Hood effect, but we're seeing the Robin Hood effect all over the world. To give you an idea, for example, in South America, where we have a lot of partnerships with the stock exchanges, prior to the pandemic, let's say Mexico thought there was maybe 200,000 individuals trading in the Mexican local markets in Mexico. A year and a half later, data came out. There was almost 1 million new people had been trading it. So
Right.
no matter where we go, whether it's in Chile, Brazil, which has been an absolute explosion, even in Russia, before the markets closed, there were 7.5 million new investors in a year came into the Russian local equity exchange. So this is a phenomenon happening in the UK, in France. Obviously, China, India have been leaders in terms of local investors. So and these local investors have almost no access to the information that the institutions have. So, in a sense, we're trying to democratize information to help inform. And again, the majority of these investors that came on recently are younger investors. They're millennials, they're Gen Z, and they are much more interested in what they invest in rather than the boomers who just want to just have a financial plan and you mentioned ETF or a mutual fund. No, no, no. The younger people want to know the companies. They have really interest in directly investing in the markets, in companies, whether it's options, equity. So this is the target market that just has evolved because of this phenomenon that happened, obviously, after the pandemic.
That's very interesting. What do you see that interests Gen Z and millennials about investing, or more importantly, investing, knowing exactly what they're investing in? Why is that so important to them?
There's a lot of dynamics. I just saw this morning how the Gen Z population, they polled Gen Zs, more than 60% of them want to be entrepreneurs, want to be financially independent. That's the highest percentage of any generation ever, right?
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, so they have this mindset where they want to be financially independent. They call it, and they all want this. They use this term called passive income. We want more passive income. I want to work for a company. We want passive income. And obviously, most of them have grown up in an environment where stocks have only gone up, unfortunately for them. But yeah, so
Yeah.
they've seen a lot of wealth creation. They idolize people, not idolize, but they see people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos who are worth 100 billion, 200 billion on stocks, right? And these are not people. Jeff Bezos never worked for a salary, right? He probably had $1 salary. It's all equity. So they see this and they want it, right? They want it more than the boomers. That they're willing to take risks because they're younger. And if you're willing to take risk and you want to make a lot of money, historically, the place to make it, there's only two places to make it. It's either the stock market and real estate. And that's where these younger people see the opportunities and they want to, and they don't, by the way, they also don't want a financial advisor. So they don't want some, 60-year-old guy telling them how to put their money in a fund. They want to do it directly. And when they do it directly, they're interested also in sustainableness. They want to they want to know what they're investing in. They want to invest in companies. And that's the
Wow.
environment we're in today. And I think that environment is going to continue for quite some time.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and perhaps you can comment on this because what I when I think about what you're saying there, the first thing I see is, for the boomers, they saw their parents' generation going through the depression and post depression, and so they came out and by and large work 9 to 5, 8 to 4, and work their whole lives, put money into stocks, this kind of stuff, mutual funds, whatever, and just save, and off they went. And now they're starting to be able to pull on that. Then you had that next generation, the Gen X, and they were out there seeing how much their parents were working, and wanted something a little bit different. So you saw a little bit more into business and business ownership, but then there's still this huge amount of work that went into my generation, but then there's this next generation that's saying we want, especially with the advances in technology, we want a little bit of both. We're not afraid to work so much, but we want to be able to enjoy more of it rather than waiting for this end goal. And it seems like each one takes a little piece from what they saw, and maybe trying to avoid what they didn't like. Is that sort of what you're pointing to?
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's demographic shifts, right? It's
Yeah.
all of this is coming now
and
into
and and a lot of them don't like, one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of them like to be able to move. The Gen Z, the millennials, really like to be able to move around. They like traveling a whole lot more. Even though we would talk about traveling, they want to do it and figure out how that works into their life as well. So there's a lot of movement there. And so as you're talking about all these other countries being involved, you're sort of pointing to something about, I don't know, globalism.
Yeah, I mean, globalism is I think you're right, but maybe globalism isn't the right term.
Right.
I think what's happened is social media, right? So there is a
Yes.
big social media component in here, right? So globalism in reference to social media. So now, younger people or anybody who's on social media. By the way, there's a lot of older people on social media as well, can see what's going on all over the world, right? So,
Yeah.
a kid sitting in Denmark can see somebody posting in California about this
Yeah.
extravagant trip they just took in Mexico, and that person in Denmark, I want to go to that place in Mexico. And they're working for a typical company in Denmark. They're making a salary enough to pay their rent, and they need more. They want more. So how could I get more? I have to have what they call passive income. I have to have something other
Yeah.
than my job. So what could I
Yeah.
do? Could I invest in an apartment and rent it out, or like an Airbnb, or can I buy some stocks and make some money? So this is, again, when you say globalism, it's really social media. The
Right.
explosion of social media has allowed information, has allowed just people to present their lifestyles, and let people say, hey, I want that lifestyle. I don't want to
Hmm.
just sit there like. And again, you made a great point. They watch their parents working 9 to 5, going on the basic vacation. These kids don't want the basic vacation. They want to go to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. They want to go to, wherever. They want to go to,
Yes.
Spain, and they want to live it up, and they want to party. And you need money for that, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Oh my goodness. I've got kids, and one's off to university, and then the second one is getting ready to go next year. And she says, "Well, Dad, I wanna go tour some different campuses." I said, "Tour campuses for what?" She said, "Well, I want to see what it's like." And I was like, and I said, how about you figure out what program you want to take, and then we'll go to the best schools that teach that. I'm not here to fund your social program. You tell me what it is you want to study, and we'll figure out what school to go to. But it was interesting because I would never have even had the thought to wonder what's the campus life like. It would have been what's the best place to go to learn that subject. And so
correct.
to what you're saying, yeah, there is this real element of, I want to sort of have it all, as that's really intriguing, because perhaps in my generation there was never this idea of, have it all. there's going to be trade-offs, right? And so
Correct.
that's sort of interesting. I don't know what I'm going to have to think about that one a little bit more. But let this is really interesting that the Braun social network has really been able to bring in this group, because one of the things that we found is that, or that we've seen, is that among Gen Z and millennials, is that a lot of them don't have this real idea of investing in that. They really do want to live all of this, have all of this life. And so is this a subsection of this whole demographic that you're seeing? And like almost like you're seeing the elite of all of these countries that are looking to come invest. How would you
No, I think it's the opposite, Neil. I think
Yes.
again, because of social media, a
Yeah.
lot of this information is available to, I mean, the information on, let's say, travel, or, is available to everybody. So,
Yeah.
no matter what your income level is, or what your demographic level is in any country, you could be on Instagram, you could be on Twitter, you could be on Facebook, you could be on TikTok, you could be on YouTube,
Yeah.
and you could watch people from anywhere in the world living it up. And
Yeah.
so you want to, and so what it does, it creates a fire in the belly. And these, the younger people, whether, again, and then you look at this Robinhood generation. So whether you have $10 or $10,000 doesn't matter. Like, so all of these trading applications have and they're open to everyone, right? So you think about 20 years ago, you couldn't open an account at Merrill Lynch if you're a kid. You couldn't open an account at Morgan Stanley. Get out of here, right? Now, there's Robinhood, and there's El Toro. There's all these companies. There's all these firms around the world. TD Ameritrade, whatever it is, Schwab. You can open an account with $10, you $100. This is what they call the democratization of trading, because it allows everyone to participate. Where in the past
Yeah.
it was only the elite.
Wow, that is interesting, because I mean, my kids, I involve them in investing in that, but one of my daughters, the same one that wanted to travel, actually wanted to open, a trading account, and we were going through contacting different banks, trying to find out what it would take to get on their platforms, and so that she could trade, and no one would give her access other than because of her age, being underage, would not give her access because she can't be held liable, obviously. So I said, okay, that's interesting. But what you're pointing to is that there is this great desire to be able to do that, to be able to build passive income, and to be able to enjoy life with all of that as well. And so you're bringing that into the Braun network now. And so investors, people that are interested in investors, can now come onto this side and be able to interact. But the companies on the other side, they're able to get more of their information out. But now, how do you get around because typically you've got to deal with pretty sophisticated or accredited investors, as they're called here in Canada. Do you run into any of those types of restrictions or regulations as you're dealing with
Not at
your
all,
network?
because we're not in the business of research or recommending companies or putting in news. We're we're looking at the signal, not the noise, right? So we're taking information that companies are producing on a legal basis for investors, right? So they're producing this data no matter what, and we're
Yeah.
just making it easily accessible. We're not favoring one company or another. We're saying, okay, if let's look at it practically. You come into the Brown Investor Network, just like Instagram or Facebook, you follow 30 companies. Okay. And because you follow those 30 companies on your home feed, on real time, you're going to get the data or the content they're publishing in real time, right? So this is also helping the companies. So what the companies say is, okay, I finally have a platform where I can reach out directly to investors. Sure, you could try it on Twitter or Instagram, but there's too much noise. It's never
Right.
going to, and also you have algorithms that block a lot of content. But
Right.
with our network, there's no algorithm blocking any content. So you can, as a company, acquire an audience of investors, direct your investors to this platform, and now you can have a really, really direct outreach to your investors using this platform. So there's a
Wow.
double-edged sword to it.
So what size companies do you find are aggregating on your network?
From the largest to the smallest, it doesn't matter. We have
Really?
Tesla on our network. We have obscure companies. We started in Latin America, right? So we have about 450 companies there. So we've got small cap companies, small cap 30 million, 20 million, and we've got $20 billion companies. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the size of the company. They all want the same thing. They all, and again, this goes back to the problem solving. They want to they want a more efficient way to attract new investors. They want a better way to communicate with investors and engage with investors. And so we offer something for everyone.
Wow, that's really interesting. Just out of curiosity, um, do you have real estate investors and hard money lenders, private mortgage guys? Do you have that kind of integration onto your network?
No, not yet. We if you're
Oh, okay.
if it's a public company, actually I'm on the board of one of the largest developers, real estate developers in Mexico, but that's another story for another time.
Yes. Okay.
But no, unless it's a public, again, we only deal in publicly
Public
traded.
companies. Oh, publicly traded. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so publicly traded companies. Because I'm one of the things that even for myself as a real estate investor and having a group of investors, and we do acquisitions and we also do hard money loans, this kind of stuff, private mortgages, and so a lot of that I don't really advertise per se as like a Grant Cardone or someone like that. And but you just kind of had me there for a second. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. You found a way because that's really what we do. And I get people that call me and say, hey, I'm interested in investing, and we go around it, but I'm not able to advertise in the same way that a publicly traded company would be able to. So that's really interesting. Now, what have you found? Obviously, the pandemic has just exploded growth for you. And what are you finding now as restrictions have kind of been lifted in most places? Even here in Canada, we've now finally lifted our restrictions, finally, which we're grateful for. But how are you finding that shift? Because we've also seen a shift where a lot of people have moved off of social media or aren't using it as much now that they've got a little bit more freedom to be able to go out again.
Hasn't affected at all. In fact, it's helped it, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
So prior to the pandemic, if you think about finance in general, or a lot of businesses, they weren't using certain tools, like in this case, whether it's video, whether it's other
Yeah.
things. And what they've discovered is that on a communications base, like look at us today, video has just
Yeah.
exploded in use. I mean, talk about your industry. The podcast industry has absolutely exploded because of
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to change overnight and say, "Oh, let's go back to. I'm going to fly to Canada and meet with Neil." No, that's not going to happen. Your
Yeah.
guests are all going to want to be remote. So video is here to stay, and
Yeah.
because it's a lot more efficient. Again, what
Yeah.
we're doing is we're aggregating information, and it's better than it was before. So we're opening markets to people that didn't have access before. That's not going to change. That's going to actually grow and grow and grow. So the fact that the pandemic is over, it doesn't mean anything. What the pandemic did, the positive things the pandemic did, was, again, in our little sphere here, video has exploded. Other
Yeah.
things, technology has made things more efficient, cutting out middlemen, cutting out the need for traveling. It's done a lot of positive things. Obviously, it did a lot of
Yeah.
really bad things, but the positive things that it's done are here to stay. So
Wow.
video, as well as platforms like ours, they're just going to continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, prior to the pandemic, I probably, other than FaceTime, I probably used video conferencing maybe 10 times total. prior to the pandemic, and then all of a sudden now it's a regular course, of business using it for this type of podcast, social media. It has just obviously exploded. And one thing that I found interesting is entire generations of people that would completely avoid, like the plague, avoid the internet and all of these functions on the internet. Everyone has jumped on from, ordering, buying stuff online, banking, all of these things. A shift that I thought would take somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 years happened in two.
Yeah, and just to put it in a financial perspective, so if you look at the use of video in finance, right? So connecting either an advisor to a client or a company to an investor, I would say prior to the pandemic, we were in that business. Less than 2% of meetings were done using video. It went to 100% overnight. It's not going back to 2%. It's probably going to stay around the 50, 60% because it's just too efficient not to. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to travel. I mean, companies used to get on planes, travel all over New York, London. It was fun. They would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to meet, 15, 20 investors. Now they can meet 100 investors and it costs them nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember before the pandemic trying to do real estate transactions where we've got lawyers and everyone involved, and some lawyers would refuse unless they met someone in person. They would refuse to deal with certain people, and you think, come on, guys, can we not do a video conference or something like that? No, that was just the way it was done. Now, no, nobody wants to see it. I do not know a lawyer that's really trying to get someone into the office anymore. Everyone wants to meet online. And so what you're saying, absolutely correct. And I'm definitely seeing it out there. So there has really been this shift. And so for your network, for the BRON network, as you're continuing to grow, more companies, more investors are coming on board. What you're finding is there's really something there between being able to have the end user get the real detailed information from the companies, and that's really been the breakthrough for you.
Yeah, it's all about financial education. So you put this big category called financial education. The big problem that companies have is they don't understand, because they've been catering to the banks and to the large investors.
Yes.
They don't understand what the individual investor needs, and they don't know how to deal with them. And what we're showing them is you don't have to do anything differently. You're already producing a lot of it. You just got to make it available to them, right? And once they do that, then there's this whole other explosion. The companies can find. I'll give an example off of our platform. So you take AMC, for example, which was involved in this whole meme stock craziness. The result of that was the AMC, the CEO, the owner, the guy who runs AMC, realized that he could use Twitter and other platforms to communicate directly with the shareholders, bypass the banks, and get his message directly, bypass Reddit and all these other. So again, this is one of many examples. They're using social media is a big positive, especially when you're trying to herd cats in a sense, right? So investors you're herding cats. So it allows you to have a direct voice. So you avoid misinformation, you avoid bias, all of this stuff that's out there. I mean, Elon Musk does a great job of that too. But at the end of the day, you have hundreds of thousands of public companies out there that don't have this voice, and we're trying to give them this voice to help them speak directly to the investors.
Yeah,
that's the hopeful part of it.
Well, look, I think it's brilliant because I remember going into the banks, and it's interesting that you've mentioned the banks, and you've had a direct experience with them, because I remember going into the banks and asking some questions, and they said, "Oh yeah, well you can invest in this, you can invest in this, and this fund, in this fund." And I said, "Okay, well, can you tell me what's in this fund? I like the sound of it. Can you tell me?" And so then they start giving you this breakdown of what's in the fund, and they said, "Okay, can you tell me what companies are actually in that fund?" Oh, well, there's companies like that are doing developments that are doing that. No, no. Can you tell me the actual companies that are there? And I said, I get that you may not have that information available right now. Can you get me that information? And for starters, they didn't have any idea of what was in the funds. Number one. Number two, they had no idea where to even gather that information to be able to provide it to me. Didn't know if it was available or any of that kind of stuff. And you think, wait, you're providing me financial advice, but yet you really have no idea what this is comprised of, other than this chart, this pie chart that shows you that this is, and so there's a certain amount of distrust that I think even what you're talking with Gen Z and millennials, what they're seeing, because how do we know that what's actually being shown is what we think it is, right? Like you're giving us this a sales pitch, but we have no idea, where you're now able to get people connected directly with the companies.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think I think I mentioned it. Like, so you have the younger people, the Gen Zs, millennials. They don't want to deal with their father's financial advisor, right? The typical
Yeah,
bank
that's
guy,
right.
right? And they did,
Yeah,
because he doesn't offer any value to them.
yeah,
You ask the question, "What's in this?" And I don't know. So they're salespeople. They don't really know. So there's this trend saying, "Hey, I want more information. I want to learn more. I want to understand what I'm doing, as opposed to just allowing someone to make decisions for me." And you're
yeah,
100% correct. That's the
yeah.
trend, and that's hopefully the space where we're doing what we should be doing.
Well, here's an interesting thing. You were sort of touching on this, being able to bypass some of these middlemen, and it's why I have some interest in the crypto space, even because you've got what you run into in most of business is you run into these different, I don't know what you want to call them, watchdogs. You've got different people in between that that have to steer you. You've got to go to them. They're going to tell you yes, and they're going to tell you no. You have slippage, in along there, because everyone's taking money along the way, and as it pertains to real estate, you're at the bias of whoever is in between, right? Whoever's in that in between, it can be very difficult to make your own decisions. I even going to the bank, and for me, trying to do transactions, and they will be asking you questions, and I'm thinking, what qualifies you to even have any idea of to evaluate this transaction, this investment, and but they are all set up to try to have the image that they know what they're doing, and you should listen to us. And what you're talking about is sort of, it's
Revolutionary, Neil. It's revolutionary.
revolutionary, right? Because not only are you challenging the authorities in power right now, but to some degree, you're taking money out of their pockets, because that money that would have gone through there, right? You're now bypassing and showing people another way to go ahead and get involved. So that makes you a bit of a dangerous man, number one. Number two, let me just ask you this question as it pertains to crypto and Web3 and blockchain. Do you have any thoughts on all of that and its ability to revolutionize finance, and with that technology, revolutionize finance, making money, wealth creation, all of that?
Well, what I'm going to say is a little controversial, but yeah, not only do I agree, I think that Web3 and blockchain, which is the technology underneath crypto, has been suppressed. No doubt in my mind. I mean, you hear the rhetoric from I'm not going to name the banks, but no matter all the large banks, all have these fintech funds, and they're, yeah, we're interested in crypto, blockchain, whatever. No, they're interested in blockchain to suppress it, because if blockchain, which has been around for quite some time, if it was allowed to sort of, become what it should be, it would put the banks out of business. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about what blockchain, essentially what blockchain is, the ledger, I mean, the most profitable business that brokers and banks have is bond trading, right? Because why? Because there's no transparency, right? So stock market trading is now a zero sum business because it's trading is free, and there's always been price transparency. Well, in bond trading, in private equity, there's no transparency, and that's why these guys have made billions of dollars over the last 30, 40 years. Blockchain should eliminate that. So what do these guys do? They've invested in it to suppress it. They know it's going to happen, but they've been suppressing the technology underneath crypto because it will put them all out of business because it offers price transparency. And every time
Yes.
you offer price transparency, the middleman is gone.
Yeah. Oh my
That's
goodness. Well, if
so
people
unstable.
understood, if people understood how backwards the the finance industry really is, I think it would blow their minds because everything seems seamless. Everything has the occurrence that it all works nicely when in fact, money gets lost every day in transfers. They charge for really doing nothing, right? That this is one of the things that I see crypto really and blockchain technology revolutionizing is because you can transfer funds from here to a place that has no physical bank like that with zero slippage, right? With nothing in the transaction costs really. But meanwhile, we've done transactions and just going sending money from one bank to another, and they lose it, and you find out, oh,
Or it's very
they're
expensive,
still,
yeah.
yeah, or it's very expensive, and you think there's got to be a cleaner way to be able to do this and make the transactions faster, cheaper, all of these, and more transparent. And I think you're right to a great degree in terms of they understand that it will affect their bottom line. So the question that I really have to ask, because you have the experience, and perhaps call me a skeptic here, will the governments, pressured by the banks, will they really allow this level of technology to see the light of day? Because we're talking we're talking trillions, if not more, in dollars.
Well, they'll have no choice because it's here to stay and it's evolving rapidly. And I mean, just take a this. You mentioned one thing about money transfers. Okay, so one of the interesting things that have come out over the last year, okay, it's controversial, are these stable coins, right? So
Yes.
there are a lot of companies. I'm not going to say if we use them, but I know a lot about it. There are a lot of companies that use stable coins to pay offshore contractors, offshore employees, et cetera, because transferring money as a small, let's take a small business, as a small business, to try to pay an offshore contractor or an offshore employee on a monthly basis, it's incredibly expensive. PayPal or your local bank, I mean, do a money transfer, they gorge you on the exchange, or PayPal hits you
Yeah.
with fees. It's just
Yeah.
incredible. It's disgusting actually.
Yeah.
Whereas a stable coin, you open an account at Coinbase or some of the others, and the other guy opens it a point, or the person opens an account there in another country. It doesn't matter what country it is, and you buy a stable coin, which is one, and you transfer the stable coin. The volatility, there's no volatility, right? And I'll go into why that's important later, but there's no volatility, and that person receives that stable coin and can transfer that stable coin through their crypto account to whatever currency they want, right? They want dollars, they want euros, doesn't, but they want local currency, it doesn't matter. And the cost is almost zero. So, I mean, there's no way to stop it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've seen recently regulators in the US, and you're going to see this in Europe. Well, they're talking about, maybe we should do a digital currency, right? Because they see.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Go ahead.
No, because
you
they
you got
they,
me
they
triggered now. You got me triggered now, Tom. Okay, go for it.
because they see that paper money is. I mean, I've had cash in my wallet for a month and never use it. There's no reason for paper money, but they also see it as a way of control, right? So the idea, most people don't understand what Bitcoin really was when it was created. And I read the white paper. So if you read the white paper, you understand Bitcoin. This is why I'm not a really big fan of the crypto, and I'll explain that in a second. But if you look at what digital money is, why does the government want digital money? Because it's control. They don't want Bitcoin to be out there because they don't have control over it. So governments are going to digitize their own currencies. They're going to do it because the technology is open to anyone. It's an open source technology.
Yeah.
So they're going to do it, right? But I think the entity, and it doesn't mean not a government, but the entity that's able to, let's say, digitize their currency, tie it to gold, make it a digital gold, right? That's the true breakthrough. That's the true disruption, because gold has been around as a store of value and currency for 3,000 years, maybe more. So if you're able to digitize gold or back a digital currency by gold, you legitimize that. All of a sudden it becomes, because you can't carry around gold, but you can carry around on your phone, Bitcoin, right? So you eliminate the volatility of the cryptocurrencies, which is the big problem with the currencies, is the volatility.
Yeah.
And you all of a sudden, I'm giving someone an idea to do this. You're giving someone now a way to carry around, hard money, or hard money, right? Hard money in their phone. Right?
Yeah.
That's the game changer. Now the governments don't ever want that. Right? So they're going to try to do it on their own with their own currencies. So everyone's going to be used. So the use of blockchain technology is just going to explode because everyone's trying to get to this same level.
Thomas, here, okay. Oh man,
I got you going, yeah.
Oh, you got me. Look, here's the thing, that when I hear that, and even when I think it, is this. That is so disruptive to our world economy that it would trigger World War III. Because you and I know, look, there's no conspiracy theory here. We know that it's manipulated. The governments tell us that they manipulate our currencies. They raise interest rates, they lower interest rates without even getting into the real conspiracy theories. Just, this is what we do. We raise it, we lower it to slow down, speed up our economy.
And print money too. That's the big.
That's right. Right. Printing, putting it into circulation, taking it out. And we see the effects. COVID has been a great case study on that, watching what happens when you inject cash into the system, what happens when you start pulling it out. And so we're seeing that right now. If what we're talking about, what you're talking about, comes to pass, it would be complete anarchy, because governments would not. It's like we're on crack, and we've got drug dealers with these geographic lines all around the world that control that. How in the world would it be possible for the world economy to get to that place where we could actually go back to some type of stable currency that was pegged against something? I can't. Actually, you've got a map right behind you, and I can see in the corner there it shows Libya, and the last guy that I remember that tried to peg that continent's currency to gold, he ended up getting invaded and was called a lot of things, and of course killed. But we're talking about Gaddafi, and never mind what you think about him. We know that happened, and we don't know what happened to any of the gold stockpile that he had. Disappeared. So how in the world could what you're talking about really happen, and how could the world governments, is this possible?
Not only is
really
possible, it's going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen. So the way the governments are going to
that's just crazy. That's just crazy. I can't.
It's going to happen.
Tell me. Okay.
Well,
okay. Give us the scenario.
His scenario happens. First of all, and this is kind of controversial. You need most of the cryptos to go to zero. That's what you need. So there's 2,000 cryptocurrency. You need 1,950 of them to go to zero. That's number one.
Wow. Okay.
The only way to stabilize Bitcoin is to wipe out the other cryptos. Bitcoin over the last 6 months has had the volatility, inherent. I'm using Wall Street term. Volatility crypto has come down dramatically. It's actually been stable, right, at these levels. And it acts when you have low volatility. That's what a currency should be, right? So when Bitcoin is moving from 20,000 to 60,000 back to 20,000, that's not a currency. That's just a speculative asset. But
Hmm.
when the volatility was through the roof, when the volatility stabilizes, it becomes more of, acceptable, right? And if
It
you think
becomes a
about
medium
it,
of exchange.
being to exchange, the
Yeah.
problem has been is that you've allowed, or not allowed, but people have just just created all these cryptocurrencies out of thin air. And if you think about it, what they've done is essentially what the whole idea is against. The whole idea what Bitcoin was created about was against fiat currency, printing money. So you're
Hmm.
every time a new crypto is created, you're printing another Bitcoin. You're printing money. So you need these things to get wiped out. They're almost all wiped out. But you need to legitimize and say, okay, listen, I'm not going to deal ever in Dogecoin or anyone else. I'm going to deal in Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you need to get rid of them. So once you have a small number of these coins out there, Bitcoin being the major coins, it becomes stable, it becomes low vol. Then it becomes people are more comfortable in using it to transact in e-commerce. And this is what
Yeah.
you were talking about. This is why I think it can coincide. But the governments realize also that their paper money, no one carries paper anymore, and it's inefficient, it's too expensive, and they're going to digitize their own currency. So
Yeah.
you're never going to get rid of the UK gilt or the UK pound or the euro. Well, the euro is going to have its own problems, but the US dollar will always be there. The Chinese renminbi,
Oh,
but they'll
man.
digitize their currencies because we're in a cashless society, right? So you can easily digitize a currency, but there's always, because the technology is open source, you can't stop it. There's going to be room for Bitcoin and other stable type coins to exist globally outside of the global currency system, right? They're going to operate on their own level, and that's going to create more activity, which is good, right? To me, it's good. It's not good for the banks because the
Yeah.
banks are the big losers at the end of the day, not the governments, but the banks.
Yeah.
They'll lose
Yeah.
control of their currency or the money. They need the money to make money, right? Banks
Well,
make money on a float. That's all they make money on. They make it on a float.
yeah.
That's it. They're
Yeah,
middlemen.
absolutely. Guys, if you're listening, man, I just want to apologize. We're getting into some real heavy stuff here, and we could probably talk for quite a while about these items because it gets into so many different geopolitical issues that this is really wide ranging when you talk about this stuff. So thanks for hanging with us. But it's important to know the things that are going on in the background and these forces because it's so difficult when you get into the investing world. When we talk about creating wealth, the show is Leadership to Wealth, and you're talking about building wealth. You have to know the rules of the game. That's one of the most important things, and understanding where can you go to make it such that you're able to play, which is one of the reasons I like what you've created with the BRON network because you've given the power back to the investors and to the companies to be able to actually converse with who wants to invest and to be able to converse with the actual company so you're actually what you're actually getting. Do some of your own due diligence, be able to get a feel for where you're putting your money and how you're building your wealth because I heard it said you want to invest in things that change people's lives, and because if you're changing people's lives, there will always be value in that. If it's something of value to people, there's going to be value, as opposed to people put their money into things all the time and they have no idea what the value is of any of those things. Somebody just sold them this idea that they're going to make money, and they have no idea. So okay. So, my goodness, Thomas, we could go into a lot of different areas here, but what I want to ask now is, 30-year career in finance, 30-year career in investing. You literally a professional investor, and now how do you go through that type of a life, get to this point? What were some of the highs and lows that have been able to that you've been able to extrapolate lessons along the way that have enabled you to get to this point to build what you're building now?
Yeah, I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's just perseverance because I think throughout my career, I guess I had a good career in a sense. I can't complain about it. But there are a lot of ups and downs. I was fired a few times. I tried the entrepreneurial thing a few times, failed pretty much every time. And I think early in my career, when I was working for Merrill Lynch as a salesperson, as a young person, getting people hanging up on me. No one wants to talk to you when you're a young kid, and people just saying, just don't stop. Right? The idea of just don't stop, just keep going. Create that thick skin. That's what you have to do as when you're an entrepreneur. You can't take what someone, like I said to people on social media, don't read the comments, because if you read the comments, they're all going to be, you're going to focus on the one out of 100 is going to be negative. You're going to focus on the negative one. So you need to just take the negative energy and thrive on it, right? So just don't quit. I mean, perseverance is the most important thing for an entrepreneur or even a successful business person. You can't never let anything get you down, and you could never quit. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that is unique for me is I started as an entrepreneur at a very late age. Like most people are looking at retirement, and I don't think I could ever retire. So like, I'm going to try this. I'm not a 25 or 27-year-old developer, but I'm going to give it a best shot. I had all the skills necessary. But there's a lot of risk involved, and you have to be able to. I mean, my career was always about managing risk, so I'm a good risk manager. That helps a lot. But it is a risky thing when you go out on your own. You probably know this as well. Starting something from zero, man, you're going against some of these institutions with billions of dollars, and that's what we're in that space. And we started literally from zero with my own money, and
Yeah.
it's been very tough. But
Yeah.
it's the whole idea is that it should be tough, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing
Everybody do it. I'm with you, and I'll say this: at this point, for me, I can't really imagine going back to, the 9 to 5. There are times where I think, you know what? Why couldn't I just be that guy? Why couldn't I just be that person and work a regular job and do that and then clock out at the end of the day? But at the same time, I think to myself, that is scarier than anything that we deal with. I mean, initially you got to learn how that process goes. You've got to learn everything from paying your taxes and putting money aside for because you're going to have the ups and the downs and figuring all of those things out. What do people want? How do I make money? How do I get because everyone has this great idea in entrepreneurship, and then you realize that you somewhere along the way you realize that my ideas, it doesn't really matter what ideas I have. What do people actually want? What do they actually need, right? And how can I create something that's of service to people, right? And so so when I hear what you're building over there, you're really looking at that connection and trying to help people out with what they need, being able to get to the actual investments and being able to get to the actual investors. So I think a phenomenal job there, continuing to build. How do you make money with your social network
Yeah, so we don't charge investors to download our application from the Google Store or the App Store.
or the app?
And
Yeah.
so what we do is we get paid on the back end by the companies. The companies pay us a small fee to extract all the information, make it available. We build out the network, and we bring the eyeball. So, and it's something that they're used to doing because they're already throwing away thousands of dollars with PR firms and traveling all over. So the return on what they pay us is astronomical versus their return on their investment, which is almost zero. They don't even know, they can't quantify the return. So we have a pretty good, I think, a pretty good business model because
Yeah.
we don't charge. I mean, we have other features that we charge for with the large investors, but essentially we get paid on the back end by the companies to. But right now we're operating in a freemium model, so we're not really charging too many companies.
Yeah.
We're just bringing in everyone, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the way you
Uh,
do it. That's the way you bring it on.
yeah. It just building so much value that at some point you can't do without, right? So
Correct.
I love, I even love the fact that you're saying, starting this late, because I think it's fantastic. Personally, I'm now at a stage where I'm looking at what am I going to be about for the next 30 years of my life, right? I know what I've done, I know what I've built, and now I'm kind of looking, okay, I've got another stage because my kids are all going off to university, and I'm entering into this next stage, and so I'm looking at that and going, do I want to build something different? Do I want what? How do I want to change what I'm building? And if you're if you're really building in a lane that you enjoy, I think you can do that till they're ready to put you in the ground. Basically, I mean, you want to be doing something as opposed to, there's no such thing as, I don't know anyone that's retired and then done nothing. And anyone that I do know that's retired and done nothing usually ends up usually
You,
ends up in the grave pretty
you get
quickly.
you get old really fast. I know some
Th-
people, in my business, there's some people that made a lot of money at young ages, and they've accumulated a lot of wealth, and they've retired early. And the ones who aren't keeping busy, you see them everywhere, and they age real fast.
Yeah. You're able to aggregate your time into what you want to be about, what you want to spend time with. And I think for people that are thinking, when we talk about leadership to wealth, for people that are thinking I'm going to make money and do nothing, this is not the show for you. This is not the conversation for you, because at the end of the day, it all starts with leadership of self. And so the fact that you could go through this whole career and then start building something fresh, something new, it just really stands that and shows, displays that how much is really going on up here for you, and also what's going on here for you. So let me ask this question as we wrap up. What's next for Thomas Samuelson? What's the next iteration for you, and what's next for the BRON Social Network?
Well, I mean, it's all for me. It's all about BRON. This is, I say to people this all the time because I read sometimes in these self-help books about entrepreneurs, and but always have a plan B. I have no plan B, Neil. This is it.
Right.
I'm all in, and there is no plan B. So the next step for us is just geographical expansion, right? So as I said, we pretty much dominate the Latin American region. We've got something. We've got some. We're involved in clean energy, cannabis in the U.S. Blockchain, and expanding on that blueprint. People ask me all the time, can you take what you're doing, can you bring it to Asia, can you do it in the Middle East? So it's just geographic expansion. So we have 70 countries to dominate, and it's going to take a long time to do that, but as we get more successful, there's going to be competition, so we've got to move fast, which is exciting. So it's just, for us, it's just conquering country. I look at it almost like Uber, right? So Uber started in San Francisco, went to different cities, and then just kept growing and that's what you have to do, because if you don't, the competition is going to come fast and hard. So it's all about geographic dominance and geographic expansion for us and going forward.
That sounds like a bit of masculine toxicity right there. We're gonna dominate everything right there.
Well, Neil, I have no choice, right? Because either I have that vision,
Yeah.
or first of all, I think investors, like let's say VCs who we raise money from, they want to hear that. They want to hear that type of vision.
Yeah.
So this is not just talk. This is what I really believe in.
Yeah.
And it's something that, because I know the landscape out there, because I was fortunate enough to travel to all these places. I know the landscape in most of these countries. especially places like China, which is a very unique place. I have a very unique understanding of China. I mean, we have a huge opportunity, but I know that as soon as people watch this podcast, we're going to get a lot of competition. I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying is, as the more successful, the more competition comes in. We've already had some competition already, which is fine. I like competition, so I'm
Yeah.
not worried about it.
Well, it's part of the reality of life is that the moment you come up with any idea, as human beings, we start thinking about the innovation to the next thing. Oh, I'd like this. And one person says, I'm going to keep it the same. And the next person says, let me make this iteration. And sometimes people like that, sometimes they don't. But that's just part of what's sort of in our DNA, right? Like we kind of build on what we see.
Exactly.
Okay, I've got another question for you, Thomas. What's the minimum requirements for, for the investors if they want to join your platform, if they want to come on the app, and for businesses if they're interested, what do they need to be able to capitalize on this opportunity?
Easy answer. There are no minimums. There's no. We don't differentiate. If we don't charge for our app for all the access to all the information. It's free to investors. As far as the companies are concerned, as long as they're a publicly traded company and on an exchange, they could join. The fee we charge is anyone can afford it. We're a volume player, so as long as it's a public company, located on some exchange, they're free to contact us and participate. And again, as far as investors concerned, they join for free, and the information, all the access to that information of hundreds and in the future thousands of companies will be available to them. So,
Right. So,
100%.
okay, and how does your family handle?
Well, my kid.
How's your family? Okay.
I
Okay.
got to talk at a lower tones now, Neil. I'm kidding. So I have three kids. They're all out of the house. So two of them live on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. I have another daughter who's going to school in Europe. So they're all out of the house. Just my wife and I. And so it's the flexibility. I mean, again, if I couldn't have started this, let's say 15 years ago when I had three kids in the house, they're all going to school. It would have been. Look, fortunately, I was making good money working for these firms, and that was good. It actually worked out better for me that this came about at this point in my life because I don't have that. Not that it's a burden. I just don't have distractions. And I got to tell you, this is going to be a very controversial statement, but the reason that most entrepreneurs start, the most successful ones, the ones you read about, started young, is because you can't do this with a married person with kids, young kids. It's very, Neil, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult. Something's going to suffer. You're going to get divorced. Your kids are going to hate you. And if you look at Steve Jobs, and I mean, they Bezos, all these, they have the same issues, right? And so, I started this knowing full well that I'm going to have some issues in my personal life. And fortunately, nothing's happened yet. But because you need to be married to the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a wife, but you need to be married, and no one is going to invest in your business unless you're 110% committed, and that is your life. And
Mm-hmm.
as an entrepreneur, and to give it's the good and bad parts of entrepreneur. There's a lot of good things I can talk about, but the bad part is, or what any successful entrepreneur knows, has to know is that this is going to be your life, and if it's going to hurt your family, unfortunately, you have to accept it and just keep moving
Yeah.
on. There's no other way around it, and it's a
Yeah.
very, very it's controversial, but I'm glad you asked that question because it's a necessary
Yeah.
evil. And I'm fortunate that I'm at a stage in life where I don't have to worry about those other things. So it's
Right.
I can
Yeah.
focus 1,000% on my company.
Yeah. I think one thing that people miss when they fall in love with the idea of entrepreneurship is I don't know if it's even you fall in love with the business or whatever. The reality is that there is so much energy that goes on, so much thought energy, and there's a lot of people out there. You're listening, and your brain's always going. You're always thinking about these things, and that consciousness, that focus on this item is taken away from these other items, right? From these other things in your life. And it's why so often the best of the best in any area of life, they usually are, they're strong there and they're weak in other areas because there's so much thought that goes into it. And it's not like you're trying to I'm in love with the business, so to say. It's just part of your makeup, right? Your brain works in such a way that you focus into these areas, and it's hard to take it off of that highway, right? It's like a highway. You're going really fast and trying to move it along. One of the things that I just want to say this for myself because I've still got teenage kids. One of the things I've had to get comfortable with is that I've got to be so protective of time with the family. Like, I can't let anything take from this time, which virtually impossible. But I've got to be so committed to giving that. Otherwise, it's gone because it doesn't come back, right? And so yes, if you can do it when you're young, yes, if you can do it when you're older. If you're doing it in between, you've got to really get angry, vicious, uh, about protecting that time for your family, or they will suffer, and that's part of the reality. And realize that it's not because you don't love them. I think that's one of the false parts for entrepreneurs is we think, oh, maybe we don't care about this person, or maybe we're just we just care about these other things. But in reality, it's just the thought processes, and there's more time spent in these areas, right? And so it takes
Correct.
away from the others. So I really want to thank you for sharing some of the reality of what that's like in building, and but even the passion to build, this new endeavor, and for sharing with us, what you're up to. Really, even right out of the pandemic, one of the worst times, first global pandemic in the history of the world, and this man, Thomas Samuelson. Where can we find you, Thomas? Before
Sure.
we go,
A couple of things. So you can go to our download our app. It's a BRON. You can do BRON BRON network. So BRON network 2Ns.com, BRONnetwork.com. You can download our app. I also have a YouTube channel if you want to hear me rant and rave about markets. You know what
right?
I do is, you know why I call it Investing Confidential?
Yes.
Because all of the information that people get in the, let's say, CNBC or BCN in Canada, and then even online, it's just a lot. It's a lot of, just they're all gurgling the same information, right? It's all whatever's on the newspapers. And what I try to do is basically tell you what's going on, but behind the scenes from my perspective, right? So I have an inside person, like an insider.
Right.
So it's like I'm giving you. It's like, when everyone talks about, I'll give you one example, and you're a real estate guy, right? So everyone's talking about the housing collapse, which I called, 6 months ago, and they're saying, oh, it's because of the mortgage rates and this and that. And I went on one rant, and I was like, the people that are telling you that the real estate market in the U.S. is collapsing because of mortgage rates have no clue what they're talking about, because the real estate market in the U.S., the move over the last 10 years, over the last 3 years, had nothing to do with mortgage rates at zero, had everything to do with the fact that Blackstone, a bunch of other hedge funds, and a bunch of public companies have been buying thousands of houses sight unseen for months and years on end, taking all the supply off the market, driving prices up. And I identified this a few years ago through anecdotal evidence. A public company called Open Door Technology, symbol OPN. The stock was 28 when I started researching it, and I basically said this company's going to zero. The stock's now below 3. Now, I'm not a soothsayer. I just said, you're a real estate guy. And if I said to you, hey, Neil, I'm going to give you, a couple of $1 million and just go on Google Maps and buy me some real estate, you'd be like, are you crazy? I mean, think about it. Everyone in the world knows one thing: location, location, location. Well, Blackstone and all these hedge funds and all these public companies raised billions of dollars. And what did they do? They just bought it sight unseen, and they destroy what I say the American dream by driving the prices up. So when you hear people say, "Oh, it's mortgage rates," no, that has nothing to do with mortgage rates. Everything to do with the fact that these institutions have used leverage and used the fact that rates were going to zero, which they knew and they took advantage of, to buy real estate, rent things out, and say, "Oh, we're just going to buy this. We don't care what we pay for these houses. We're just going to rent it out because we've got all these idiots that want to rent, and we'll leverage it, 20 times. So even though we only get, this a 3% return on the house, or we don't care because we're going to leverage it 20 times and we're going to return 15, 20% to our investors on a cash basis." That's all gone. These guys are all going to go to zero because Blackstone 6 months ago turned from the largest buyer to now the largest seller. They're not saying that, but if you do any kind of invest, you could see that they're putting their inventory on the market at a discount. Open Door is going to go bankrupt. This is a public company. Zillow, which was the canary in a coal mine, a year ago, they raised all this money. They bought all these houses. 6 months later, they took $2 billion write down because everything they bought was underwater, and they were smart enough to dump it all at took a big loss on a quarterly basis and went on. But this is what's happening, and it's happening in other countries, probably happening in Canada too. Is that this artificial market, this artificial bubble, was a complete sham from day one. It's like the 2008 housing crisis, except the fact that it's not individuals holding the bag, it's these big institutions. But no one's hearing about it because they're the big advertisers on media, and they're the ones who pay all the money to the banks. So no one's understanding. But this is why this thing is collapsing.
One of the things that when you're talking about that, it's actually considered fraud if you or I were to do that, right? If
100%.
Right, we've seen it here in Canada. I'm sure it's been done in the States, where someone will come in, they've got money, you come into a neighborhood, you buy a house, you pay $100,000 over the asking price. And then you buy another house on the street and you pay $100,000 over the asking price. You've immediately set a new price for that neighborhood. Now, all of a sudden, everybody else people are, oh, yeah, okay, this is the price for that. And so they're selling their houses. And then what do they come back and do? Once that's now the market price, those two properties that they bought, they go and they sell them. And they've artificially raised the price across the board in that neighborhood. But they've taken their money and they've run. And that's considered fraud. Meanwhile, if you do it on a large enough scale, it's good business, I suppose.
Investing.
Right? It's investing. Having said that, one of the things that I do talk with people around that one is, there is an importance in understanding the interest rates or that which you can actually control. You may not be able to control some of these outside forces, but there are still more than enough ways to be able to protect yourself within that eco, if you want to call it that, or whatever, that industry, right? So, but wow, yes, absolutely. There's so many different aspects to it that we could get into because when COVID hit, I started telling people, here's what's going to happen. The governments of the world are already telling us what they're going to do. So we need to shift. We need to acquire more properties, but everything's going to go up. Get some hard assets. Everything's going up. We watched everything go up, and then I started telling people, all right, everything's going down, including crypto, including the stock market. I post on LinkedIn, I write this stuff, and I got so much shade. People were like, oh, what do you don't know what you're talking about, crypto to the moon. I said, nope, no, none. All of this stuff has to drop because the people that don't know what they're doing have been throwing away money. And even if crypto has a value, even gold and silver that have value, the moment people are exposed on the other end, they have to take money. They can't keep flowing money into these things because inflation is eating away at them on the other side. So
100%. The YouTube channel, if you want to hear me rant and rave about markets, it's called Investing Confidential on YouTube. But outside of that,
Love it.
it's just you can download our app and be part of that community of investors in companies. And again, if you want to hear me rant and rave about markets, you can go to my YouTube channel, Investing Confidential.
Oh, that's awesome, guys! Go check out Investing Confidential on YouTube, and of course the BRON Network. You can download the app in the Google Store and the App Store. And Thomas, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
We could